Hello everybody, my name is Brady and we are back with another React video, and today we're going to be continuing the Extra History series on the history of paper money. I've enjoyed the series so far. I took a little bit of a break to check out some other stuff because I fell behind on my recording. Previously I was doing these daily and I was doing double uploads, so I would do the Extra History stuff every day, and I'd like to get back to that. Right now I'm in the middle of a decent sized paper that I'm just trying to focus on, so that's caused me to put these not on the back burner. I'm still doing them plenty, but I'm not doing them daily currently, but I will get back to that pretty soon. Don't even trip about that. We're gonna be cranking these out real soon because I really love how Extra History presents things. They're one of my favorite channels personally to learn from since I've started this channel. That's why I like putting so much emphasis on them. This one is called Barebones Economy. I'm not sure where exactly we're going to be going with this. They teased something at the end, like some major figure or figures that are going to be coming in. I don't know where, when, or what we're going to be talking about, so I guess we'll just get it started and see where this takes us. I'm excited to be on the journey. Let's do this.
In the last episode, we got to the ad hoc, unofficial beginnings of paper money. This week, we look at some of the rogues gallery that really created the intellectual argument for adopting paper money in some more official way. When we last left off in England in 1640, the first unofficial banknotes were starting to circulate. But in the early 1660s in Stockholm, the first semi-official banknotes, the first banknotes from what we might think of as a central bank, the first banknotes that really started to replace a hard currency, began to appear. But with those banknotes come the problem of unregulated fractional reserve banking. Remember how we mentioned that the goldsmiths of London realized that using banknotes they could actually lend out more money than they had gold or silver to cover? Well, in Stockholm, they really went to town. Soon, there were so many banknotes out there that people couldn't help but notice. And as soon as people noticed, everybody rushed to the bank to get their banknotes turned back into coins, which, of course, they couldn't do. And there goes the Swedish economy.
Oh god, this... And we're gonna get back to very similar situations like this. This is you can see where the stock market comes from. While it's a confusing thing that doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, it kind of quantifies a lot of the same principles that go into this. So I really like that. I like learning about this like basic economic stuff because it actually makes sense. Once you get into like the more abstract stuff, like I get lost pretty easily. Like he starts throwing out like a little bit of jargon here. He hits me with the occasional economic term, and I start to get nervous. If you don't explain it in very plain speak, I start to, oh no, are we gonna start getting the stuff that requires me to like understand maybe math or something of the sort? Like economics, it's not exactly math, but it reminds me enough of math, and I'm bad at math, so it scares me.
So clearly there were still some kinks to work out with these newfangled banknotes. Now let's hop back to England, one civil war and half a dozen other wars after Charles I so politely jump-started this whole banking thing with that forced loan of his. The year is 1695. The English have just gotten themselves kicked around in the Channel by the French. And if we know anything about history, we know that that will never do. So the English establish a central bank, the Bank of England, to raise money and to help the government pay to refit the navy. As part of this, they issued banknotes. But the idea of banknotes and their role in the economy had been a topic of debate in England for a few years, which...
I like that we're getting into the rebuilding of the Navy. I think British naval history, sometimes their Navy is blown up a little, like it was big, it was powerful. They had the most powerful Navy on the planet at a time, and that can't be taken away from them. But one must also understand once colonialism really picks up, despite the fact that their navy is huge, they're going to be a little bit spread thin. Like, you go back to the mainland, the fact is, they're small. they're pretty small compared to the amount of territory that they are controlling. And they, in the case of the Americas, don't get as much military support when they really start settling into that stuff. So the idea of them building the Navy that would really be important in an era that I pay very close attention to. I would love to know the economics behind that. That's great.
Banknotes and their role in the economy had been a topic of debate in England for a few years, which leads us to the first of our roguish economic theorists, and yes, this is his real name, Nicholas, if Jesus Christ had not died for thee, thou hadst been damned, Barebone, who, for obvious reasons, went by the name Nicholas Barbon. Nicholas Barbon's father...
If Jesus Christ had not died for thee, thou hadst been damned. Okay, I'm curious if he was born with that name. I assume he was. I assume that's not one of those names like you change your name after the fact. That must be... What were they thinking there? That's interesting to me. In early American history, we don't have a whole lot of middle names, but every once in a while you run into... somebody with a middle name, and it feels long and strange. This one's odd. I don't have to say that this one's odd. You recognize that this is odd. Sometimes I just point out the obvious. I'm sorry.
Barebone, who for obvious reasons went by the name Nicholas Barbon. Nicholas Barbon's father was, praise God, Barebone. Yes, really, who will surely make an appearance in episodes covering the English Civil War. Nick Barbon started his career as a doctor, getting his degree from the University of Utrecht and joining the Royal College of Physicians. But this trade had too much saving people and too little amassing vast quantities of wealth, so Nicholas turned instead to real estate and construction. Luckily, he hit a break when, in 1666, the Great Fire of London swept through and incinerated about 13,000 homes and left about a sixth of the city homeless. Huzzah! This, of course, was seen as a great opportunity by Barbon, who would rebuild most of London and even, very illegally, reshape it. If you've ever been to the western parts of the Strand or Bloomsbury, those areas basically exist because Barbon didn't listen to any of the restrictions that said that you couldn't build between London and Westminster. After all, as he saw it, that's where the open land was, where easier to build. I mean, yeah, it's open because it's illegal to build there, but what are they gonna do, tear down the houses he just built? They're already built. Deal with it.
That's fun. As I've talked about a whole lot, I've been trying to get a little bit more into geography, and that's a fun little geography factoid. I knew about the fire. If you study... even studying American history when, we're a little bit removed from this event here, but even then, you encounter a lot of talk about the fire. It's definitely one that echoes for generations.
And from there, the sky was the limit. Barbon first got into the reputable business of selling fire insurance in a town that had just burnt down. After that, he realized that he could invent the mortgage. I mean, I can't say that he was absolutely the first person to really invent the modern mortgage, but he certainly was the first major player to do so in England. He created the National Land Bank and began to issue loans secured by people's homes or property. He followed that up with a few stints in Parliament, largely to avoid prosecution. Then he retired to write some books. And it's really the books that we're interested in, and the thoughts he put in them. Because while I have been joking about his wild and rapacious greed, he was highly intelligent, and it's kinda hard to write him off as evil. All of these things he did actually ended up having positive effects, and his writing sort of shows that he knew that. Insuring people against fire provided him with a guaranteed profit, but also created a great deal more stability for the English economy.
This is a complicated situation. There are a lot of people who will do good things, but you'll question whether or not their heart's in the right place. But then you can ask the next question, does it really matter if their heart's in the right place? If they're just trying to profit off of it, if they're doing like a net good, the utilitarian in many of us would say, yeah, it doesn't really matter what his intentions were. If he made some money doing some good. What right do we have to be mad at them? Everybody benefited. I'm not a perfect utilitarian. Sometimes I care about the reason, and the ends don't necessarily always justify the means for me, but from what I'm given from him, it's not the worst situation. He probably should have listened to regulations on building in places, like not building in places you're not supposed to build in or whatever, but like generally I'm not passionate enough to get pissed off at him for that.
Fires were still a major issue, but no longer would they be a massive economic displacement. Instead, everybody would put some money into the pot to bail out whoever lost their home or trade to a fire, and he would skim a little from the top. Great for the economy.
Nice.
And mortgages? While we might today think of them as the bank's way of keeping us down, so much of England's wealth was locked up in real estate that it was a huge drag to the national economy. When people bought a house, that money just stayed locked up in that house. It didn't circulate through the economy, it didn't help to finance businesses, it just sat there until somebody generations later decided to sell it. But with the idea of the mortgage, the single biggest asset that most people owned was now freed up to help drive the economy. Instead of the seller simply getting a pile of cash and the buyer getting an unspendable house, the mortgage freed up that value. You could now spend your house and live in it too, meaning that that money could circulate through the economy again and again. And Barbon was also, of course, one of the first people to decouple morality and spending. Which totally sounds evil, I admit, but up until this point, a lot of the writing on money was written by the church, basically arguing that everybody lived the simplest life possible. And that's
a lot of the money... a lot of the talk of money in this one, it feels like we're going back and forth between, like, paper money and other concepts here. I mean, I guess you can't really have the history of paper money without introducing other complicated economic systems. But I kind of like that we're going back and forth between that stuff. We're learning about much broader things than I originally anticipated. And I think that makes this even more interesting than just a history of paper money. It's a very specific, like, economic history we have going on here, but it's more than just paper money. It's just a particular route that they happen to be taking to explain this economic history. Don't step on my keyboard, little buddy.
probably good advice in a lot of ways, but it doesn't make for a dynamic economy. Barbon argued for fashion and innovation because they get people to buy new goods before they've fully consumed the previous goods, thereby creating demand. And while we're not to Adam Smith yet, the basic concept that demand creates supply and grows the economy is there in Barbon's work. But for us, his most important work is probably his arguments against mercantilism. Mercantilism was the driving political and economic theory in most of Europe in Barbon's day. Basically, it sort of saw nations as being in a state of perpetual economic war. The goal for any nation was to get as much literal gold and silver as it could for itself, and try not to give any to anybody else. In a broader sense, the object was to have your state be self-sustaining, importing as little as possible while exporting as much as you could.
We are so far removed from that at this point. As far as self-sufficient nations go, there's not that many. We have so much when it comes to, like, so much dependency on other nations when it comes to free trade. Like, the United States, we are a big example of that. So we are very far removed from mercantilism. And for better or for worse, you know, like there are some cases in which I would like us to be more self-sufficient, relying on other countries for things like oil and whatever. It definitely leads to a lot of sketchy politics in the middle, but I do kind of, to an extent, like the interconnectedness. I'm not a complete isolationist on that note, but like I don't know exactly where I fall. Like, my economic politics are not fully developed. I would say I have some things that I firmly believe in, but I'm still working on my my end game economic politics. We'll see what it's like. I'm still young. I got time to figure out what I believe.
Colonies existed to feed the mother country, and weren't allowed to trade with any country other than their colonial power. And when imports had to be made, the goal was to only import raw materials, so that they could be turned into more valuable finished goods in your country. And while today we see a lot...
That's a big thing in, like, Atlantic history. We talk about, like, the Spanish and British Empire a whole lot. The Spanish Empire, for a time, was a bit more of a closed system. In the British Empire, when it started to do well, it was a bit more open. It was an empire based very much on commerce. And I think that was some of the higher points of its history. Although there were some bad calls made, we ended up having a revolution, and a whole lot of it fell apart. At least that stage of the British Empire fell apart, and it moves into like a new era of it. So, like, one could say the British Empire still is not over yet. We still got plenty of time for that one.
A lot of reasons why every country trying to produce every type of good is a terrible idea. In some ways, mercantilism makes a lot more sense when you think of economies based on commodity money, like gold or silver. After all, if your entire economy is based on gold and silver, then your economy can literally only be as big as the amount of gold and silver you have. While many were starting to see this dilemma, Barbon cut to the heart of it. He basically said that even gold and silver don't have innate value. They're just worth whatever the market values them at. So instead of stockpiling more gold and silver to grow your economy, why don't you just get rid of gold and silver entirely and move to paper money? But these ideas of Barbon's are only the beginning of the intellectual groundwork that will see a world accept slips of paper in exchange for a loaf of bread, a cell phone, or a house. Join us next time and we will witness somebody else try to put their own theories on paper money into practice on the grandest scale.
I wonder how far this is gonna... This has like 5 episodes, I believe, or 6. I believe most of them seem to lean towards like 5 or 6 episodes. Dude, like, this has been really cool and really educational. I've been quite down with what this is bringing to the table here. It always leaves me not really knowing what's next, though I have like a little bit of grasp of British history. I'm not sure exactly who we're stepping to, because I didn't know that much about Barbon. I feel like I heard his name before, but I was expecting to get to Adam Smith pretty soon. But okay, this has been really cool. So I'm going to be wrapping up this series pretty soon in the grand scheme of things, so if you guys have any suggestions for other extra history series you want me to check out, pop them in the comment section below. I'm going to be doing a poll on the community tab in the near future, so be checking that every once in a while. Probably right before I start the South Sea Bubble series, which I'm going to be doing next. Fortunately, it's right here. Isn't that fun? And that's like a big economic thing, I believe. So that's kind of cool. So we're going to be going to that, and then I'm going to go to the winner of the poll that I'm going to be doing once I've started that. So that's the thing. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time with another video. All right, bye.